But first, earlier this week, Shell reported its highest profits in 115 years. It's also been revealed in the Telegraph that energy companies have been hoarding your money, $9 billion of customers' money this winter. That's more than 4 times the sum previously calculated. The government is under increasing pressure to rethink its windfall tax on energy companies after Shell reported one of the largest profits in UK corporate history in 115 years. So, are energy companies shamelessly profiteering at a time when many people are finding it pretty hard to make ends meet, or should we be taking a bit more of a nuanced look at this all? I'm asking, is it moral for energy companies to make large profits during the cost of living crisis? Joining me now to debate this is the Conservative MP for Thanet South, Craig McKinley. Thank you very much, Craig. And trade unionist and broadcaster Paul Embery. So, Craig, may I start with you? It looks like we have a windfall levy on oil and gas companies. That's taken the overall tax rate from 65% to 75% on producers of oil and gas in this country. Is this what a Conservative government should be doing?
No, it's not, and that's why I railed against it when it was even proposed at 65%, let alone 75%. We have an energy crisis in this country. We are relying on foreign sources of energy, obviously most of it created because of the Putin illegal war in Ukraine. But what is the sense in buying LNG from Qatar and enriching the treasury of Qatar rather than having more domestically with the security that brings, the jobs, investment, the tax, and everything else, and balance of payment savings, and yet we seem determined, under the guise of net zero, to import gas and oil from abroad, and yet tax domestic suppliers to death. Now, I do realise that big headline rate of £32 billion profit for Shell is unpalatable to many, but that's the reality of capitalism. Are we going to enter a sort of policy where we tell companies what they should or shouldn't earn? Now, I just had a quick look this afternoon at the profits of some supermarkets. Tesco earned over £2 billion last year, Sainsbury's £730 million, Asda a little over £1 billion. And then we sort of extend that to Apple phones that we all know and love, profits of over $20 billion. Now, are we saying that these fundamental products, particularly in supermarkets and food we eat, should we be telling them, well, you shouldn't really be earning a profit, guys, it's really not very fair? Or is that what capitalism is all about? Now, we don't shed any tears for those oil and gas companies who actually lost tens of billions during the COVID period. They just happen to be having a pretty good time today. I mean, copper manufacturers, the price of copper has doubled since April 2020. And copper, a new fundamental in linking up all that renewable energy, the solar panels, the wind power and all the rest of it, double the price. So, a market is a market. We either have a market-driven economy or we don't. But on that question, is 75% right? No, I think it's absolutely wrong because it is being shown already to be deterring investment in the type of stuff that we need a lot more of in the UK.
Yes, we've seen that Total Energies, for example, has said that they're going to be cutting their investment in this country by 25%. Now, forgive me for thinking, Rishi Sunak and also Jeremy Hunt know full well that if you tax industries till the pips squeak, essentially, that investment will drop. Why are they doing this? Is it just populist?
Well, I think there's a bit of that going on, Emily. Yeah, so everybody, obviously on the opposition benches saying, oh, it's all too much profit, we'll tax it really heavily. So there's a bit of politics involved. But in terms of, I think, what the Treasury orthodoxy is, they're trying to enjoy what I call a bit of a sugar rush. Getting a massive amount of tax today, trying to, repair public finances that are in a diabolical state. But my view is you're actually going to end up with a deferred tax loss into the future, as those profits just will not arise in years 3, 4, 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, as these big companies just decide, well, we might as well invest in Brazil and export the products back to the UK. What is the point? But yeah, that big headline, £32 billion of profit for Shell. I mean, I don't hold a candle or fly a flag for Shell at all, but only 5% of those were actually derived in the UK. Most of that, 95%, was derived abroad and will be taxed accordingly, according to the tax rates in the countries where those profits were raised. So, yeah, big headline figure, big headline loss a few years ago. Other companies just as Shell have got a fiduciary duty, the directors have, to actually maximise profits. I mean, let's put it in very simple terms, Emily. I expect you've sold a car in the past, so have I. I expect you've sold things on eBay, so have I. We don't sort of think, oh, well, we'll sell it a little bit cheaper because that would be nice. No, you sell it for what it's worth. That's what a market is all about.
Well, the opposition, of course, have called these profits outrageous. They say that Shell should not be making such bumper profits while people can't afford their bills. It seems to me that the Conservatives have already lost the argument when it comes to windfall taxes. How on earth are they supposed to put forward the case for free market economics and for capitalism if every step of the way they seem to give in to the opposition?
Well, I mean, the whole energy market is such a mess. You've had the wind farm, the wind energy producers, a lot of renewable producers have similarly been earning supernormal profits because they're selling their electricity, only, of course, when the wind blows, for rates that are set by the gas market. So they've been earning huge amounts of money. The contracts that BEIS entered into with these companies were completely flawed, which allowed them to earn this sort of money rather than the fixed price that we keep getting told is so cheap and so affordable and so nice. There's profits being earned all over the place. That is the market. And if you start manipulating markets, you won't get the investment you want. You won't get the proper use of capital in an efficient way. And this is what we'll get. We are reaping, unfortunately, years of energy price failure.
Now, Craig, one thing, I mean, I'm sure you've had your constituents writing to you about how they feel they're being ripped off by their energy suppliers. The Telegraph was reporting that energy companies are hoarding, that's the word that they used, hoarding £9 billion of customers' money and increasing their direct debits even for people who are in credit. What can the government do to clamp down on that kind of thing? That does seem like bad business practice, does it not?
Oh, we're seeing some appalling business practices across the electricity and utility suppliers. I mean, we had the story this week of Centrica, British Gas, almost breaking into people's homes to actually fit prepaid meters when people were in arrears. That in itself, there's some horrendous stories going on there. And yes, we've all had these. I mean, I faced it myself trying to up my direct debit, but the direct debit scheme does not allow these companies to do so unless you've been informed. Now, what I've done with one of them, what were trying to play games with me, I've simply just cancelled the direct debit and said, well, if you're not going to play fair, I'm not going to either, and I'm cancelling my direct debit. So, that's what I've done. They are not allowed to increase your direct debit without your full instruction. And if they do, you've got recourse back to your bank. But yes, I think Ofgem have got a lot of work to do to make sure some of this appalling behaviour that we've seen over the last few months is put a stop to, and stop now.
Now, Paul, we have you back. Thank you for coming back to us. So would you agree, you take a different view, we've had Craig's view there, would you agree that with Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, he accused Shell of making these kind of outrageous profits out of Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine? It seems to me that he's making the claim there that Shell is war profiteering.
Well, I mean, I'm a great believer, Emily. If something feels wrong, then it probably is wrong. And I caught some of what Craig was saying earlier about Shell's profits, the £32 billion profit that it has made in the last year, being the reality of capitalism. Actually, I would call it the ugly face of capitalism. And I do think, and you use the word profiteering, I think that's exactly what this is. There's a difference between the profit motive, and I have no issue with the profit motive at all, people working hard, companies earning profits, and naked profiteering, particularly at a time of hardship and want, which is what much of the country is experiencing at the moment.
Paul, he did make the point, though, that Shell was losing money 2 years ago.
Well, 2 years ago is 2 years ago. What we now know is that Shell, at a time when millions of people in this country are struggling to make ends meet and struggling to pay their mortgages and energy bills, and in some cases actually struggling to put food on the table, and people being told that you've got to show restraint when it comes to your wages, people in the public sector being told you can't have a decent pay increase this year, people in the private sector experiencing the same. The idea that we should just sit back and put our hands in the air and say, no, it's absolutely fine. These companies can make these record profits at a time. And companies in this case who are directly providing the product that millions of people are struggling to pay for. This country at the moment, Emily, is experiencing the tightest grip on workers' wages since Napoleonic times. Millions of workers are being told they have to take a real terms pay cut. And I think the idea that anybody in government or elsewhere should just step aside and say, but we aren't going to intervene when it comes to these record profits, I think is absolutely negligent.
Paul, I completely understand the emotional argument, but these oil and gas companies are being taxed now at 75%. How much more do you want them to be taxed? There are unintended consequences of doing so.
Well, actually, I think when you look at companies like Shell and you look closely at the amount of tax they pay, they often have very imaginative accountants, shall we say, and they find ways of paying as little tax as possible. So I have to say I don't quite believe it when Shell says that they're paying whacking great amounts of tax. But look, even if that were the case...
Well, hang on, Paul. They made. I must pick you up on that, because they made annual profits of 32.2 billion. And they paid 10.5 billion in global taxes. That's a lot of tax.
Well, I mean, global taxes is one thing, but in terms of how much they paid here, I think that's questionable. But the real point here, Emily, is should it be right, first of all, that a company like this should be making billions of pounds of profits at a time when other people in the country are struggling? And actually, when it comes to things like critical services like energy and other important parts of our infrastructure, these things actually I don't think should be in private hands. I don't think it should be for something upon which this country relies as crucial as energy to be handed over to the private sector, and for us, the rest of us, millions of families, to be at the whim of the private sector.
Can I ask Paul a question?
Very quickly, Craig.
It should be publicly owned. I think that's unarguable now.
Very quickly,
I
Craig.
very much understand your argument you're putting forward, and it's a perfectly reasonable one. Is it moral that Tesco are earning over £2 billion a year? Surely they must be charging a little bit too much for food. Should that be under sort of public ownership as well? I mean, a very easy question.
It is an easy question. £2 billion isn't £32 billion, and I don't think there's any direct evidence necessarily that Tesco are benefiting to the extent from inflation and profiteering as a result of it in the way that Shell are. So let's start first of all, Craig, with the biggest miscreants, and then perhaps we'll look closely at the others as well.